The reprisals came 2 days later at a pub in the tiny village of Loughin Island. Customers were watching the World Cup. UVF gunmen sprayed the bar, shooting dead 87-year-old Barney Green and 5 other Catholics. But despite the brutality of such attacks, some loyalists still seek to explain them away. That's cold-blooded murder. What else is it?
I call it retaliation, which is not quite the same thing.
But you end up with dead Catholics who are innocent.
In retaliation for dead Protestants who are lying on the Shankill Road, yes, I could do that.
But that doesn't justify the death of innocent Catholics, does it?
If you're sending a message out to the IRA that if you kill a Protestant, someone is going to pay for this here. Now, it may be crude and it's vicious, but the end may well justify the means.
After Loughin Island, there was much soul-searching within the UVF leadership. It's unlikely the massacre was authorised from the top, but it wasn't necessary, as local units could act with a degree of autonomy.
I said to myself, how can this be when they are talking peace? And so within hours of that dreadful atrocity happening, I was in touch with them to say, explain this to me. Because if you don't explain it to my satisfaction, you can forget about me.
What was your reaction to Loughin Island?
Worst day of my life. Worst day of my life.
You've been asking people to put the guns away. That included your own people. The UVF did Loughin Island.
Yeah, well...
Slaughtered 6 innocent Catholics in a bar.
I don't know how I could remotely describe how I felt or how many around me felt, but we really felt we were getting somewhere. Really felt we were getting somewhere. It was beginning to happen, beginning to fall into place. And then bang.
And at that time, David contacted me, and I really told him that I felt like walking away from it because I felt that they had honeyed words. I was beginning not to trust, or I was beginning not to believe what they were saying. However, he reassured me that what he had initially said to me was true, that what they were trying to achieve was peace, and for me not to walk away from it.
My contacts were sufficiently sure in their own minds that it was worth going on with it.
So you did?
Yes, I did.
Secret talks were also being conducted on the Republican side, and they finally produced the long-awaited IRA ceasefire.
The leadership of the IRA have decided that as of midnight August 31st, there will be a complete cessation of military operations.
The IRA had been moving in this direction for several years, recognizing that one day politics would replace the gun. But loyalists see it differently.
I believe the UFF strategy brought Sinn Féin to the negotiating table because they couldn't handle the pressure that was being put on them by their people.
But Sinn Féin were on their way to the negotiating table anyway. What
Yes.
the UFF did might have been a factor, but that wasn't the reason they declared a ceasefire and entered talks.
We believe it was a major factor.
What did the Loyalist paramilitaries achieve?
The Loyalist paramilitaries achieved something which perhaps the security forces would never have achieved, and that was they were a significant contribution to the IRA finally accepting that they couldn't win.
In the wake of the IRA ceasefire, there were expectations that Loyalists would also let their guns fall silent. But there were internal differences. Not all felt they should follow suit, especially when they believed they had the IRA on the run. Did you support the Loyalist ceasefire?
I went along with it because the Loyalists had called it.
But were you personally in favour of it?
At that particular time, I thought it was called a bit too soon. But that was my opinion.
But the view that won the day was that it was now time for Loyalists to put their guns away.
When I first joined the organisation, I joined the organisation because Republicans was attacking our communities. Then it was stated, once they stop, we will stop. And that was the case when they called a ceasefire. We had to stop.
6 weeks after the IRA's ceasefire, the Loyalists called theirs. It was announced by the UVF veteran Gusty Spence. He'd been convicted of murder way back in 1966.
In all sincerity, we offer to the loved ones of all innocent victims over the past 25 years abject and true remorse.
When you announced the Loyalist ceasefire, why did you say what you did?
Because it was the most obvious, the most humane, and the most logical thing to say. True and abject remorse. It has to be said. Society has to say it to all aspects. All aspects of society have to say it to each other. Individuals have to say it. Groups have to say it. Abject and true remorse.
Did he speak for you?
Absolutely. Without doubt. Without doubt. Here was the alpha and omega, perceived by many to be the first, Gusty Spence, part of the first violent men of this recent era, and reading out a statement that pulled the curtain down, or we hope would pull the curtain down, on a brutal and awful past.
I think one of the great lessons out of this whole process, which may be incidental to the result, but nonetheless important in human terms, is the capacity for personal redemption. The ability of people who have made serious, tragic errors, violent errors, committed brutal atrocities, to accept responsibility, to be punished for it, to accept their punishment, and then to change, genuinely change.
Despite the ceasefires, confrontation was not over. It simply moved to a different setting, Drumcree Church. The issue was now marching, not killing. It was forced not by the Loyalist paramilitaries, but by the Orangemen, pillars of respectability within the Protestant community. They demanded the right to march home through a nationalist area, which the residents found provocative. Although a compromise was reached, the Orangemen saw it as a great victory. David Trimble and Ian Paisley glowed in their triumph.
We're delighted to be back down the traditional route, as we expect to be again.
Predominant feeling was one of relief, because I'd realised earlier in that day that we were facing a major crisis. The situation was incredibly serious. We'd managed to resolve it. Now, when we'd got safely home, back to the Orange Hall, then, yes, the brethren showed their pleasure by applauding myself and Ian Paisley, and I was very happy to acknowledge their applause.
The lasting image of you on that day is one of David Trimble, the exulting Loyalist triumphant. That's how it came across.
It has been so portrayed.
That's what the pictures show.
It has been so portrayed, and Republican propagandists have made considerable mileage out of their misrepresentation of the situation.
The following year, there was a rerun of the confrontation at Drumcree, but now with paramilitary menace. It came from Billy Wright, the notorious leader of the local UVF, known as King Rat. Wright supported the local Orangemen, who once again faced a standoff with the nationalist residents. Although the UVF was on ceasefire, Wright was prepared to use violence to force the issue.